Top 15 rare gemstones almost thrown away. Throughout history, miners have extracted countless crystals from the earth. Most were broken, chipped, or otherwise unremarkable, discarded in piles beside the mine pits. Yet amid the debris, some stones will one day rank among the rarest gems known. This is not a story about diamonds or rubies, long revered and preserved. It is a story about minerals that have been overlooked, mislabeled, or mistaken for something else. Shards of rock that were once considered scrap, rubble, or flawed. Some were discarded because their color was dull. Others were crushed for industrial use. Some sat in museum drawers under the wrong name for decades. Their journey from rejection to recognition shows the fine line between obscurity and value. In the chapters that follow, each gemstone stands on its own, not as part of a market trend or a myth, but as a record of science, accident, and circumstance. We'll only see species identified after laboratory testing, decades after they were first discovered. And we'll see how absence of recognition, of supply, of context can define a gemstone's place in history as much as its brilliance or durability. Here's a ranking based not on fame, but on its extraordinary journey from discarded to recognized. These are the top 15 rare gemstones that almost got discarded. Ranked 15th, Sphene, the brilliant gem discarded as quarry waste. Sphene, more commonly known today by its formal mineralogical name, titanite, is a calcium titanium silicate. It crystallizes in the monoclinic system, often forming wedge-shaped crystals, hence the Old Greek root sphenos, meaning wedge. To most who worked in quarries or iron mines in the 19th century, it appeared to be little more than a brittle fragment, yellowish, sometimes moss green, occasionally brown. It lacked the deep saturation of sapphire or the brilliance of topaz. Its hardness hovered around 5 to 5.5 on the Mohs scale, meaning even a simple steel knife could scratch it. In mining culture, that softness was a mark of worthlessness. So the stones were discarded, shoveled out with the rest of the rubble. Yet within those crystals lay a property no miner could have guessed. Titanite's refractive index, measured by mineralogists in Europe, nearly reached 2.0. Its dispersion, the ability to split white light into spectral colors, was recorded as higher than that of a diamond. On paper, those numbers made it an optical marvel. But on the ground, the science had little impact. Miners still judge value by durability and appearance. The paradox was stark. The brighter the data became in laboratories, the dimmer the stone's reputation remained in the field. During the late 19th century, scientific societies began documenting titanite in their annual bulletins. Minute entries appeared. Titanite, CATISIO5, found as accessory mineral in granitic and metamorphic rocks. These notes were technical, detached, but they preserved the mineral from complete anonymity. By treating it as something to be measured and cataloged, the scientists rescued it from being entirely erased with the quarry dust. It took another century before gem-quality material truly surfaced. Madagascar produced transparent green crystals. Pakistan yielded sharp specimens from the Gilgit-Baltistan region. When cut, these stones displayed flashes of spectral color so intense that gemologists began to champion them, not as mainstream jewelry stones, but as collectors' gems. To a trained eye under light, Sphene revealed reds, greens, and golds in a way few minerals could. But even in this new role, it was fragile. Jewelers who experimented with it often found that the stones chipped during the setting process. That fragility confined Sphene to display cases, not daily wear. Unlike emeralds or rubies, titanite carried no myths of healing, no ancient ritual role, and no royal provenance. Its story is quieter. A mineral overlooked in industrial heaps, nearly forgotten, kept alive only by the persistence of scientific record-keeping. Collectors today value Sphene for its optical brilliance, but always with caution, knowing its limitations. In museums, specimens are presented more as demonstrations of light dispersion than as examples of enduring adornment. This subdued legacy sets titanite apart. It never commanded armies of traders, never built empires, never drove wars or pilgrimages. Instead, it lingers in scientific archives, in drawers of mineral collections, in the precise measurements of refractive indices written in journals more than a century old. Its journey is not one of glory, but of survival through documentation. And in the end, that is its place in the story of gemstones almost thrown away. A mineral once discarded, later preserved not by glamour or commerce, but by the careful act of recording data. Ranked 14th, Blue John Fluorite, England's worthless stone that became a museum treasure. Today, visitors to the British Museum or Chatsworth House may find delicate vases and goblets carved from a stone patterned with purple-blue veins. The material, Blue John Fluorite, now sits behind protective glass, admired as a relic of English decorative art. However, this is not the beginning of the story, but rather its end. To trace it back, one must move in reverse. Before the showcases and the collectors, there were the workshops of Derbyshire artisans in the 18th and 19th centuries. They polished the unusual banded fluorite to ornamental pieces for the wealthy. Demand skyrocketed, fueled by the nobility's appetite for exotic materials. Yet even at this stage, Blue John remained a local curiosity, not a global commodity. Earlier still, at the mouth of Castleton's mines, miners had little interest in the oddly streaked fluorite. For them, fluorite was a low-grade industrial mineral, valuable as flux in smelting, but not worth the effort to haul when veins showed irregular colors. Many pieces with purple and yellow bands were left in heaps or discarded outright. To the eyes of miners focused on lead and iron, it was waste. It took artisans rather than merchants to redefine its worth. The very qualities that miners dismissed, the unstable colors, the irregular stripes, were reinterpreted as beauty once the material was cut and polished. Artisans saw potential in contrast, bowls that caught candlelight, urns that displayed unique patterns. What had been rubble became a signature of English decorative craft. The name Blue John is believed to derive from the French phrase bleu et jaune, meaning blue and yellow, a nod to its characteristic colors. By the late 18th century, shipments even reached France, where lapidaries shaped them into small ornaments. But the stone remained tied to its origin in Derbyshire. Unlike rubies or diamonds, there was no far-reaching trade. It was an English phenomenon, defined as much by scarcity of locality as by appearance. By the 20th century, over-extraction had dramatically reduced supplies. Mines were periodically closed and reopened only for limited excavation, sometimes for just a few months each year. Today, only small amounts of Blue John are legally mined, often reserved for conservation or limited artisan use. Its value is not in hardness or brilliance, but in heritage. Looking backward clarifies the irony. The same banded fluorite, once ignored in the mines and deemed unsuitable even for industrial use, is now protected, displayed, and tied to national identity. Blue John's survival rests not on geology alone, but on the shift in perception, from worthless to collectible, from rubble to museum object. The final image loops back to the origin, Castleton miners casting aside streaked fragments into waste piles, unaware that centuries later, those very patterns would sit beneath museum lights, locked behind glass. Ranked 13th, Andalusite, the flawed crystal that became a sacred emblem. Where other minerals were overlooked due to their dullness, this one was rejected because of what it revealed within. Andalusite is a polymorph of the aluminosilicate group, sharing chemistry with kyanite and sillimanite, but crystallizing under different pressures and temperatures. Transparent varieties can be faceted, producing gems that shift from green to reddish tones depending on light. Yet the most distinctive form has never been transparent. It is chiastolite, whose crystals contain carbon inclusions that form geometric crosses. When miners first encountered these crystals in Andalusia, Spain, the markings were seen as defects. In quarries where clean feldspar and quartz were sought, stones streaked with dark graphite were treated as waste. The same judgment followed in Australian fields. Fragments with black crosses were tossed aside, crushed into aggregate, or left in spoil heaps. The mineral's structure had betrayed it, condemning it to be classified as flawed. That judgment changed slowly. By the 18th and 19th centuries, collectors and clergy began to notice the cruciform patterns. Cut across the grain and polished, the crystals revealed sharp, symmetrical crosses that seemed too precise to be accidental. For geologists, the explanation was straightforward. Graphite trapped during crystal growth in carbon-rich metamorphic rocks. For priests and lay believers, the shapes carried an entirely different meaning. They were signs, emblems formed without human hands. The same feature that miners rejected became the very reason others treasured it. Castellite was included in the cabinets of curiosities and natural history collections. Churches in some regions use polished slices as devotional objects, not because of their brilliance, but because they carried a ready-made symbol. Through this dual lens, scientific on one side, symbolic on the other, the mineral's status is reversed. The black cross no longer spoiled the stone, it defined it. Instead of rubble, it was set aside, carried, and sometimes revered. In the modern gem trade, faceted Andalusite is recognized for its strong pleochroism, which causes it to flash green, yellow, and red in turn. Castellite still emerges from deposits in Spain and China, cut not for jewelry stores, but for collectors and those interested in the meeting of geology and culture. Each specimen shows the same principle, carbon intersecting within a crystal. But each cross is unique. The inclusion once condemned the crystal to waste. It became the mark that preserved it, ranked 12th, Hiddenite. Not every discarded gem is dull. Some were discarded precisely because their green color appeared too unnatural to be trusted. Hiddenite is a chromium-bearing variety of spodumene, a lithium-aluminum silicate. Like its relative kunzite, it forms elongated prismatic crystals with pronounced cleavage, which makes it fragile. On the Mohs scale, it rates between 6.5 and 7.5, firm enough for display yet risky for jewelry. Its identity lies in color, yellow-green to emerald green, caused by chromium. Under polarized light, the stone exhibits pleochroism, displaying a green flash from one direction and a yellow flash from another. In 1879, miners in Alexander County, North Carolina, dismissed the mineral entirely. They were digging pegmatite veins for feldspar, mica, and beryl, minerals that carried value. The green fragments they found seemed brittle, cloudy, and indistinct, waste rock rather than treasure. Many pieces were dumped into spoil heaps or crushed into pieces. The story shifted with William Earl Hidden, a mining engineer working on behalf of Thomas Edison. Though searching for platinum, he noticed the green crystals and considered them unusual enough to warrant study. He sent samples to J. Lawrence Smith, a mineralogist in Kentucky. Smith's analysis revealed pleochroism, refractive indices, and cleavage characteristics consistent with those of spodumene, not quartz. A distinct variety had been found. Smith named it Hiddenite in honor of Hidden, placing the mineral firmly in the scientific record. For a brief moment in the 1880s and 1890s, Hiddenite caught attention. Jewelers cut small faceted stones and marketed them as American emeralds. Collectors were intrigued by a gem named after a living person. The town that grew around the deposit adopted the name Hiddenite, embedding the discovery into local geography. But the success was short-lived. Hiddenite's cleavage made cut stones fragile. Many chipped or split during the setting process. Supplies were thin, with only sporadic pockets of gem-quality material. Emerald, sapphire, and diamond remained far more durable and reliable for jewelry. By the turn of the century, Hiddenite had faded from prominence. Later finds in Brazil, Madagascar, and Afghanistan expanded its known distribution, but never in abundance. Most crystals were either small or fractured. Hiddenite persisted mainly as a mineralogical rarity, remembered for its discovery and its name, rather than for widespread use. Specimens now appear in museum displays across the United States. Some are kept as rough crystals to show their pleochroism under rotating light. Others are faceted and mounted with care, despite their fragility. In North Carolina, annual festivals continue to honor the discovery, blending local identity with the state's rich mineral history. Gemology recognizes Hiddenite as one of 3 spodumene varieties, alongside kunzite and tryphane. Its distinction is not in commerce, but in the narrative. Misidentified as quartz, recognized by science, and permanently linked to one locality and one man's name. In museum cases and private drawers, the same crystal once thrown aside as rubble is preserved with a label, Hiddenite. The stone itself is unchanged, its survival secured by the act of naming. Ranked 11th, Zektzerite, the feldspar look-alike, that turned out to be unique. Some gemstones vanished because they looked too unusual. Zektzerite almost disappeared because it looked ordinary. Zektzerite is a rare lithium zirconium silicate. It belongs to the family of complex silicates, crystallizing in the triclinic system. Its colors are subdued, pale pink, peach, tan, sometimes light green. With a hardness of about 6 on the Mohs scale and a vitreous luster, it closely resembles the feldspars and quartz that dominate granitic rocks. That resemblance was the reason it was overlooked. The mineral was first identified in the mid-1960s in the outcrops of the Golden Horn batholith in Okanogan County, Washington. Collectors and prospectors scoured the area for pegmatite minerals, including topaz, beryl, and garnet. When they stumbled upon Zektzerite, it blended into the rubble. Many fragments were mistaken for feldspar or discarded entirely. To the eye of a prospector, there was nothing to set it apart. Systematic analysis revealed otherwise. Under the microscope, thin sections exhibited optical properties that did not match those of feldspar. X-ray diffraction confirmed a new structure, one absent from existing mineralogical catalogs. In 1967, mineralogists declared it a new species, naming it Zektzerite after Jack Zektzer, a Canadian researcher of silicates. The act of naming formalized its identity. An overlooked shard was transformed into a recognized mineral. In the decades that followed, Zektzerite remained a scientific curiosity more than a gem. Transparency was inconsistent, with most crystals clouded or fractured. A few were clear enough to facet, producing pastel-hued stones, pale pink, lilac, or peach. Their value lay not in brilliance, but in the rarity of their recognition. They existed because someone had bothered to look closely. Collectors of rare mineral species placed Zektzerite among micromount specimens, valued for identity rather than glamour. Museums acquired pieces from Washington and later smaller finds in Afghanistan and Canada. Yet the mineral's narrative always pointed back to the Golden Horn batholith, a reminder that even rocks mistaken for feldspar could hold something entirely new. Unlike emeralds or rubies, Zektzerite carried no myths, no legends. It never crossed borders in caravan trade, nor did it ornament crowns. Its significance is geological, not cultural. It demonstrates how easily rarity can hide in plain sight, indistinguishable until science intervenes. Faceted Zektzerite gems are rare and typically modest in size. They circulate among collectors who prize them as specimens of definition rather than beauty. Most examples remain in their natural form, preserved in museums or cataloged in private collections, each accompanied by precise locality labels. One crystal from the Golden Horn batholith, once discarded as feldspar, now sits in a case under the label Zektzerite. The object itself is unchanged. Its meaning comes entirely from recognition. Ranked 10th, Serendibite, the forgotten gem hidden in Sri Lanka's sapphire fields. Serendibite was first described in 1902 near the gem-rich region of Ratnapura in Sri Lanka. Its name came from Serendib, the Persian and Arabic word for the island. The discovery was made not by miners seeking it, but by scientists examining fragments that others had dismissed. To those working in the fields, dark bluish-green crystals offered nothing compared to the brilliance of corundum. They were left aside, mixed with tailings, or crushed with skarn waste. Chemically, Serendibite is unusual, a complex calcium, magnesium, aluminum borosilicate that crystallizes in the triclinic system. Its colors range from deep green to blue-black, sometimes nearly opaque. Only under certain conditions does it yield transparent sections, and those are extraordinarily small. With a hardness of 6.5 to 7 Mohs, it could in theory serve as a gem. But in practice, most specimens were too fractured or too dark to cut. For decades, the mineral lingered in obscurity. A handful of samples were sent to laboratories where their refractive indices and pleochroism were recorded. However, outside academic journals, serendipity was barely mentioned. No caravans carried it, no merchants traded it, no chronicles celebrated it. Its existence was confined to reports, chemical formulas, and specimen drawers. The narrative briefly shifted in the late 20th century when transparent crystals were found in Mogok, Myanmar. For the first time, Serendibite could be faceted. A few carats here, a few there. These gems entered private collections and auction houses, where their rarity made them objects of fascination and admiration. Yet even then, their presence was fleeting. The number of cut stones remains vanishingly small, perhaps a few dozen in total worldwide. Unlike emerald or ruby, Serendibite never shaped myths, never adorned crowns, never left a trace in ritual or art. Its cultural absence defines it. The mineral existed, but only as an annotation in mineralogical literature, as an exception noted by specialists. In the present day, Serendibite's status remains unchanged. Mines in Sri Lanka continue to produce sapphires, garnets, spinels, but Serendibite emerges only rarely, and even then in fragments too small to shape. Collectors are aware of it, while museums may display a single-faceted gem, but for most it remains invisible. Its story fits the theme of gemstones almost thrown away, not because they were ever common, but because they were nearly erased by neglect. Had mineralogists not recognized its unique structure in 1902, Serendibite might never have been distinguished from skarn debris. There are no legendary jewels, no royal inventories, no markets filled with Serendibite. Its record is a thin line in mineralogical history, marked less by presence than by near-total absence. Ranked 9th, Grandidierite, Madagascar's overlooked crystal that became one of the rarest gems. Some minerals fade not because they are rare, but because they appear too ordinary. For most of the 20th century, Grandidierite survived only in the pages of mineralogical journals, barely noticed beyond laboratories. Grandidierite is a magnesium-aluminum borosilicate. On the Mohs hardness scale, its hardness of 7.5 places it among the durable silicates. Its pleochroism was striking. Rotate a crystal and the colors shift between green, blue, and nearly colorless. Yet the first samples found in southern Madagascar were fractured, cloudy, and unattractive. To miners, they were waste. To jewelers, they were irrelevant. In 1902, French mineralogist Alfred Lacroix recorded the species, naming it after Alfred Grandidier, the explorer who had mapped Madagascar's natural history. That act preserved the mineral in science, but gave it no role in trade. For decades, Grandidierite lingered as an academic entry, rarely displayed, often forgotten. The absence of gem-quality material defined its early history. Textbooks mentioned it. Museums held opaque lumps in drawers. Collectors rarely encountered it at all. The stone existed outside the commercial fabric that sustained other gems. A reversal came late in the 20th century. Near Fort Dauphin in Madagascar's south, geologists uncovered transparent crystals. When rotated under light, they revealed the full spectrum of pleochroic shifts. Deep blue from one axis, vivid green from another, pale ghostly tones from a third. For the first time, Grandidierite could be cut and set as a gemstone. Even then, the scale remained small. Faceted stones were almost always under 2 carats. Cutting was difficult, as internal fractures could destroy the gem. The few rocks that survived made their way to auctions, where their scarcity placed them alongside Painite, Serendibite, and Taaffeite. Gems defined more by rarity than by cultural tradition. Grandidierite's story diverges from other gemstones. Unlike ruby or sapphire, it had no centuries of trade behind it. Unlike jade or turquoise, it carried no ritual symbolism. It was a mineral lifted from obscurity by chance transparency, valued through recognition rather than legend. Inconsistent yields continue to mark its history. Deposits have been noted in Sri Lanka, Namibia, and the United States, but Madagascar remains the primary source. Mining often produces nothing for years at a time. Museums preserve both the opaque masses that first define the mineral and the rare transparent crystals that change its status. For laboratories, Grandidierite is a study in optics. Its pleochroism is documented, its refractive indices have been measured, and its absorption spectra are filed. For collectors, it is a matter of fortune. To hold a transparent crystal is to possess what miners once ignored. The mineral that was once discarded has become a benchmark of rarity. Its recognition was never rooted in myth, but rather in the persistence of science and the lack of geological evidence. The narrative returns to 1902, when Alfred Lacroix described an opaque crystal and set it aside. At that moment, Grandidierite was nothing more than a dull specimen. The radiant stones of later decades already existed underground, waiting unseen until someone finally recognized them. Ranked 8th, Jeremejevite, the aquamarine. That wasn't. Not every rare gem is hidden in darkness. Some are visible, but mistaken for something else entirely. Jeremejevite was first described in 1883 in the Transbaikal region of Siberia. Mineralogist Pavel Jeremejev examined a tiny colorless crystal and recorded its formula, an aluminum baryte fluoride. The specimen was scientifically significant, but far too small to inspire interest beyond academic circles. For nearly a century, Jeremejevite lived in obscurity, mentioned in mineralogical references but absent from commerce. The turning point arrived far from Russia, in the arid landscapes of Namibia during the 1970s. Miners searching for aquamarine and pegmatites encountered pale blue prismatic crystals. Their clarity and color were familiar, too familiar. The stones were assumed to be aquamarine, cut, sold, and, in some cases, discarded when fractures appeared. Only later did detailed analysis reveal that these were not beryl at all. The refractive indices, specific gravity, and chemical composition told a different story. What had been casually labeled aquamarine proved to be Jeremejevite, one of the rarest gem minerals on record. The inversion could not have been sharper. A stone dismissed as ordinary beryl was, in fact, an independent mineral species known to science for almost a century, but had never been seen in gem form before. Entire parcels of crystals had already been overlooked. Some had likely been lost forever. However, a fraction survived, was tested in laboratories, and was recognized for what it was. From that recognition, Jeremejevite entered the world of collectors. Transparent crystals were fast-setted, producing gems of delicate blue or golden yellow hues. They were small, often weighing less than 2 carats, yet their scarcity and history of mistaken identity gave them weight in gemology. Museums acquired specimens. Private collectors sought them out. What had once been nearly invisible was suddenly a highlight in the catalog of rare gems. Jeremejevite's story carries no mythology, no ancient tradition. Its power lies in misidentification. For decades, it masqueraded as aquamarine, hidden in plain sight. The act of seeing it correctly, of naming it accurately, transformed its fate. Today, Namibia remains the most crucial source. Smaller deposits are known in Myanmar, Madagascar, and Tajikistan, but yields are limited. Faceted stones are still rare enough that each one is documented individually in auction records and laboratory reports. In terms of supply, it is a gem of exceptions, not of abundance. Its status reflects a central theme. Rarity is not always about invisibility. Sometimes the rarest gems are those that everyone sees but no one recognizes. Jeremejevite is proof that even in a parcel of aquamarine, something entirely different can hide. Once assumed to be common aquamarine, the crystals revealed their true identity. Jeremejevite, a mineral known by name since 1883, but only recognized in gem form when the mistake was overturned. Ranked 7th. Sinhalite, the brown peridot corrected after a century. Some stones disappear through neglect. Others remain visible, mislabeled generation after generation. Sinhalite belongs to the baryte group. Its hues range from warm, honey brown to pale greenish tones. With a hardness of 6.5 to 7 on the Mohs scale and good transparency, it held the qualities of a gemstone. Yet for nearly a century, it was mistaken for something else entirely, an inferior variety of peridot. In the gem gravels of Sri Lanka during the 19th century, miners pulled these crystals from riverbeds and pits. Their forms and optical properties resembled those of olivine. Dealers sold them as peridot, though of a less desirable brown tone. Cutters faceted them, catalogers recorded them, and markets circulated them, all under the wrong name. For generations, the mislabel persisted. By the mid-20th century, subtle discrepancies began to surface. In 1952, gemologists subjected the stones to closer testing. Refractive indices and specific gravity did not align with peridot. Spectroscopic analysis revealed a decisive difference: the presence of boron, which is absent in true olivine. With this evidence, mineralogists declared a new species to be a distinct entity. They called it Sinhalite after Sinhala, the ancient word for Sri Lanka, where it was first identified. The correction reshaped the record of the gem trade. Stones thought to be peridot were suddenly reclassified as something else. Museums inspected their collections and discovered specimens that were mislabeled. Dealers adjusted inventories. Collectors learned that some of their peridots were not peridot at all, but a mineral with its own identity. The revision spread slowly but firmly, sealing Sinhalite's place in gemology. Unlike sapphire or emerald, Sinhalite carried no myths, no ritual history. Its importance lies in this narrative of error and correction. The stone illustrates how easily a gemstone can be misclassified, even when abundant, and how careful analysis can overturn assumptions that lasted a century. Transparent Sinhalite remains a rare and highly sought-after gem, prized mainly by collectors. Deposits have been recorded not only in Sri Lanka, but also in Myanmar, Tanzania, and Madagascar. Its presence in the market is modest, overshadowed by gems with deeper traditions and stronger demand. Yet its identity is now secure, defined by the very act of recognition that separated it from peridot. In gemological literature, Sinhalite is fully established. Its formula, refractive values, and optical behavior are documented. Laboratories distinguish it with ease, using spectroscopy and chemical analysis. What miners once dismissed as brown peridot is now recognized as a distinct mineral species, preserved both in scientific records and in collections. Record filed 1952. Sinhalite, first described in Sri Lanka and distinguished from peridot by boron content. From mislabeled to mineral species, the file is closed. Ranked 6th, Musgravite, the gem, hidden inside another name. Musgravite was first described in 1967 in the Musgrave Ranges of South Australia. The original specimens were small, opaque, and unattractive. They entered mineralogical records as curiosities, not as gems. For years, the entry was little more than a scientific note. The situation changed as faceable crystals began turning up elsewhere: Sri Lanka, Madagascar, and later Tanzania. Dealers and cutters saw stones of muted gray, pale green, or delicate violet. To their eyes, they were Taaffeite, already one of the rarest gems known. The resemblance was convincing: similar refractive indices, nearly identical specific gravity, and close spectral behavior. Musgravite and Taaffeite were, for practical purposes, indistinguishable. For decades, the two names blurred. Stones were sold, set, and cataloged as Taaffeite. Musgravite existed, but hidden within the identity of its relative. Collectors held it without knowing. Museums listed it under the wrong label. The misidentification was not neglect. It was invisibility through resemblance. Laboratories eventually ended the confusion. With Raman spectroscopy and X-ray diffraction, structural differences became clear. Musgravite's atomic arrangement diverged just enough from Taaffeite to warrant separation. Stones once thought to belong to one category had to be reclassified. Certificates were rewritten, auction records amended, and the name Musgravite began to stand on its own. This recognition altered its place in the field of gemology. A gem already scarce, Taaffeite, was now divided, leaving Musgravite as the even rarer sibling. Transparent, faceable crystals were so limited that each one became an individual case study, documented in laboratory reports and collector journals. Unlike emerald or sapphire, Musgravite carried no mythology. Its significance rests entirely in science, in the act of drawing a fine boundary between two minerals nearly identical to the eye. What makes it remarkable is not what it represents culturally, but what it demonstrates scientifically: that rarity can hide not in obscurity, but in mistaken identity. Known sources now extend beyond Australia to Sri Lanka, Madagascar, Greenland, Myanmar, and Tanzania. Yet the yields remain vanishingly small. Faceted gems are counted in dozens rather than thousands. Auction houses list them cautiously, laboratories scrutinize them closely, and collectors treat them as near-mythical finds. Musgravite embodies the tension between resemblance and recognition. Its existence was not overlooked through neglect, but rather subsumed under another name. Only technology forced the separation, and with that, the silence of confusion gave way to a precise identity. The instruments confirmed the boundary, reports were issued, the confusion stopped. Ranked fifth, Pezzottaite, the 21st century gem that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Pezzottaite is a cesium-bearing beryl. At first glance, it resembles morganite, another pink member of the beryl family, but subtle differences define it. Pezzottaite crystallizes in the trigonal system rather than the hexagonal system, with higher birefringence and distinct optical properties. Its refractive indices and dispersion exceed those of morganite, producing a richer, almost raspberry hue that shifts under light. On the Mohs scale, it ranks around 8, durable enough for jewelry but scarce in availability. The story began in central Madagascar, near Andalusite. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, miners extracting pegmatite minerals brought out pinkish crystals. To local eyes and to many buyers, they looked like morganite. Pleasant, but not extraordinary. Parcels were sold and cut without distinction. Some stones entered the market labeled simply as pink beryl. They were admired for their color, but nothing suggested that a new gem species was hidden inside. Laboratories provided the turning point. In 2002, researchers at the Gemological Institute of America, along with independent mineralogists, tested samples from Madagascar. Under petrographic microscopes and X-ray diffraction, the crystals revealed structural traits inconsistent with beryl as previously defined. The cesium content was unusually high. Lithium was present. Optical tests revealed birefringence and absorption spectra distinct from those of morganite. It was not just a variant, it was a new one. The species was formally named Pezzottaite, in honor of Federico Pezzotta, an Italian mineralogist who had contributed extensively to the study of Madagascar's pegmatites. Publication of the description in the mineralogical record cemented its place in science. Within months, trade journals were filled with references to raspberry beryl, the market name attached to the newly defined stone. For a brief period, Pezzottaite garnered attention in the jewelry market. Its vivid hue distinguished it from softer-toned morganite, and collectors were eager to acquire a gem documented only in the 21st century. Cutters produced faceted stones, some exceeding 10 carats, prized for their rich, saturated colors. But excitement collided quickly with reality. The deposit near Andalusite was small. Mining produced only limited quantities of gem-quality material. By 2005, the source was largely exhausted. Attempts to locate additional deposits in Afghanistan yielded crystals, but few reached faceable quality. The gem's trajectory was compressed into a handful of years. Discovery, classification, brief commercial popularity, and rapid scarcity. Unlike sapphires or rubies, which have centuries of tradition, Pezzottaite exists in a modern archive. Its importance lies in how quickly science and trade intersected. What miners sold as ordinary pink beryl was transformed, through analysis, into a distinct species with its own name, identity, and entry in gemological literature. Today, Pezzottaite survives mainly in collections. Museums retain specimens, often with the original documentation attached, from 2002 to 2003. Private collectors hold faceted gems as representatives of one of the few gemstones discovered, named, and exhausted within a single generation. In the broader market, it has no stable presence. Its rarity prevents it from being traded continuously. Yet its record is permanent. Ranked fourth, Poudretteite, from forgotten fragment to the rarest pink gem. In the 21st century, Poudretteite is known as one of the rarest gemstones ever cut. Museums guard tiny faceted stones, often weighing less than 2 carats, each accompanied by detailed laboratory reports. Collectors value them not for size or durability, but for the fact that only a handful exist. Auction houses mention the name with caution, aware that specimens are so scarce that entire sales may pass without one appearing. These finished stones originate from Mogok, Myanmar, where miners working the famed marble-hosted deposits discovered crystals with a delicate pink glow in the early 2000s. At first, the material was mistaken for spinel or tourmaline, common in those gravels. Only under laboratory study did the match emerge. The crystals belonged to a species once thought to be irrelevant, almost forgotten in the mineralogical literature. The rediscovery of Poudretteite brought it into the spotlight of gemology. The excitement was immediate. Journals carried notices of the rare gem reappearing in unexpected form. Dealers described it as raspberry pink beryl, despite its unrelated chemistry, while laboratories emphasized the accuracy of the identification. For the first time, Poudretteite existed not as opaque fragments, but as transparent crystals that could be faceted and set. The rediscovery altered its reputation. Before Mogok, Poudretteite had been cataloged only in textbooks. In 1965, mineralogists at Mont Saint-Hilaire, Quebec, first described the mineral in pegmatite rock belonging to the Poudrette family. The crystals were microscopic, opaque, and scientifically interesting, but commercially irrelevant. The species was named Poudretteite in honor of the family who owned the quarry. But beyond that, it gained no traction. No jeweler requested it, no dealer traded it, and for decades it remained an obscure entry in mineralogical records. Mogok broke that obscurity. When the first faceted stones reached laboratories in 2002, they forced experts to reopen a closed file. Reports confirmed the match between the Canadian-type material and the Myanmar crystals. Suddenly, a species that had seemed destined to remain only in drawers and textbooks had become one of the rarest gems in circulation. Yet its moment was brief. Mogok produced only limited quantities, and most of the crystals were too small or too fractured to cut. By the mid-2000s, the pockets that yielded Poudretteite were exhausted. A few isolated reports came from Afghanistan, but the stones were never large enough to change the situation. Supply dwindled, demand remained high, and the mineral's role shifted again, this time back into rarity and absence. In gemological circles, Poudretteite stands as an example of how discovery, rediscovery, and exhaustion can occur within a single lifetime. It is a gem with no myths or rituals, no ancient trade routes or royal crowns. Its significance lies in the precision of science and the accidents of geology. Miners once overlooked it. Laboratories brought it back into relevance. Collectors now preserve it as a case study in rarity. Most people will never see Poudretteite outside a museum display or a journal illustration. Those who do encounter it find that its value is not in brilliance or hardness, but in context. The knowledge that it is both a rediscovered species and a nearly vanished gem. From present-day museum cases, the story moves backward to the rediscovery of Mogok. From Mogok, it retreats further to 1965 in Quebec, where a quarry worker handed over a fragment so small it barely filled a slide. That fragment carried the name. Everything that followed was only recognition delayed. Ranked third, Painite, once the rarest gemstone ever recorded. Painite is a calcium zirconium borate. Harder than quartz with a Mohs hardness of nearly 8, it forms hexagonal crystals that range in color from reddish-brown to orange-red. Under polarized light, its pleochroism shifts subtly between red and brownish tones. Nothing about its chemistry or structure should have guaranteed fame. What set it apart was the absence. The story began in the early 1950s. Arthur C.D. Payne, a British gem dealer and mineralogist, obtained crystals from Myanmar's Mogok region. They resembled spinel or garnet, common in those deposits. Payne submitted them for analysis. Laboratories in London identified a new mineral species, and in recognition of his role, they named it Painite after him. The act of naming fixed it in the mineralogical record. Yet almost no specimens followed. For decades, Painite became a rumor more than a reality. The British Museum of Natural History held one crystal. Later, a second was confirmed. For years, these two were the only items in public collections. Reference books described Painite as the rarest gem in the world, and Guinness World Records echoed the claim. Collectors knew the name, but no one could obtain the stone. Dealers mentioned it only to explain its absence. This void defined Painite's reputation throughout the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. Other rare minerals such as Taaffeite or Serendibite at least appeared occasionally. Painite remained elusive. Miners in Mogok did not recognize it. Scientists could not locate new deposits, and the market had nothing to offer. Its fame rested entirely on not being there. The turn came in the early 2000s. Renewed exploration in Myanmar uncovered additional crystals, this time in quantities that exceeded the earlier handful. For the first time, gem laboratories received multiple samples to test. Some were transparent enough to facet, producing reddish stones that entered collections. Museums updated their cases. Dealers wrote cautiously about the change. Painite was no longer confined to two crystals, though it remained scarce. Even with these discoveries, Painite never became a trade gem. Its supply was too limited, its crystals often fractured, and its color was subdued compared to that of ruby or spinel. Faceted stones larger than a few carats were extraordinary, each accompanied by detailed provenance. Collectors prized them for their history, not their brilliance. Laboratories documented every new piece, continuing the record that had begun with a single crystal in London. Unlike emerald or sapphire, Painite has no cultural associations, no myths attached to its name. Its story is a scientific one. A mineral is identified, then becomes absent, and then is rediscovered. What fascinates collectors is not its market value, but its trajectory through time. How something could be known for 50 years yet remain unseen. In gemological literature, Painite occupies a unique space. It demonstrates that rarity can be defined not by beauty or durability, but by the scarcity of specimens. For half a century, students of gemology learned about a mineral they could never examine. When additional pieces finally surfaced, the prolonged absence gave them weight far beyond their size or color. The files document two crystals in London, unchanged for decades, and silence in the trade. Painite's story is not built on abundance, but on the space where it was missing. Ranked second, Benitoite, California's own gem that glows under UV light. Benitoite is a barium titanium silicate, formula BATIS 309. Its hardness measures 6.5 on the Mohs scale, enough for jewelry but softer than sapphire. Its color is striking, deep blue to violet blue, often compared directly with corundum. Under ultraviolet light, Benitoite fluoresces a vivid electric blue, a trait that distinguishes it instantly from almost any other gemstone. The mineral entered science in 1907. Miners exploring San Benito County unearthed vivid blue crystals and sent samples to experts for analysis. At first, they were thought to be sapphires given the resemblance in color and transparency. Further study overturned the assumption. The crystals were something new, with a unique structure in the hexagonal system and a chemistry that included both barium and titanium, elements absent in corundum. A new mineral was declared, and it was named after its birthplace, Benitoite. From the beginning, scarcity defined it. The only source of gem-quality crystals was the Dallas Gem Mine in California. Other deposits later identified elsewhere produced small or opaque fragments, but not stones of cutting quality. The mine yielded transparent crystals in limited quantities, many of which were tiny, while others were large enough to facet into gems exceeding 1 carat. Each carried the unmistakable hue that set Benitoite apart. Collectors quickly recognized its significance. Museums added specimens to their collections. Jewelers experimented with faceting, though the hardness limited its practical use in rings. More often, Benitoite found its way into pendants or remained uncut in mineral cabinets. By the mid-20th century, it was firmly established as one of North America's most distinctive gem species. Benitoite also became a case study in the intersection of science and state identity. In 1985, California declared it the official state gem. School textbooks mentioned it, science fairs displayed it, and local museums showcased it as part of the region's natural heritage. Unlike emeralds from Colombia or rubies from Burma, Benitoite did not establish global trade routes. Still, it stood as a symbol of locality, a reminder that even a single mine could yield a mineral unique to the world. Its rarity grew as the Dallas Gem Mine slowed. By the early 2000s, production had nearly ceased. Collectors who wanted faceted Benitoite had to turn to existing stocks. Laboratories still highlight its properties, particularly its dramatic fluorescence, but the material is scarce and large stones are almost unobtainable. In cultural terms, Benitoite has no myths or rituals associated with it. Its reputation is scientific and regional. For gemologists, it demonstrates how quickly a specimen can move from misidentification to recognition as a new species. For Californians, it is a marker of state identity. For collectors, it is a gemstone defined by its origin from a single locality and a finite supply. Unlike many rare stones, Benitoite's rarity is not only geological, but geographic. The mineral's identity is inseparable from its birthplace. To hold a piece is to have California's geology in concentrated form. In a glass case at the California Academy of Sciences, a crystal of Benitoite sits on white matrix, glowing under ultraviolet light. The nameplate reads, Benitoite, San Benito County, California. The stone remains. In first place, Taaffeite, the gem discovered by mistake, now among the rarest on Earth. Most gemstones were known for centuries before they were scientifically identified and classified. Taaffeite was the exception. It entered the record because of a mistake. In 1945, Count Richard Taaffeite, a gem dealer in Dublin, examined a parcel of cut stones purchased from a jeweler. Among them was a lavender pink gem identified as spinel. Under magnification, he noticed something spinel should never show: double refraction. Spinel is singly refractive. The observation contradicted the label. Taff sent the stone for analysis. Mineralogists confirmed the anomaly. Tests revealed a new species distinct in structure and chemistry from spinel, which contains both beryllium and magnesium in a configuration previously unknown. The stone was officially named Taaffeite in honor of the man who spotted what others overlooked. It remains the only gemstone in history to be first recognized in faceted form rather than in its rough crystal form. That singular beginning shaped its identity. Unlike ruby, sapphire, or emerald, Taaffeite carried no cultural or historical weight. Its reputation rested on rarity and on the chance of recognition. Throughout the mid-20th century, only a handful of specimens were discovered, most of which came from Sri Lanka's gem gravels. Dealers and cutters often misidentified them as spinel. Only laboratory analysis could confirm the difference. By the 1980s, the number of confirmed Taaffeite gems remained astonishingly small. Reference works described it as one of the rarest minerals known. Collectors searched for it in vain. Most never encountered a specimen in their careers. Museums guarded the few available, usually small, faceted stones or fragments, too modest for jewelry. The geological story added to the intrigue. Taaffeite crystallizes in metamorphic environments rich in beryllium and magnesium, conditions far less common than those producing spinel or sapphire. Even when it does occur, crystals are usually fractured or opaque in appearance. Transparent material suitable for cutting is vanishingly scarce. In markets, Taaffeite never gained traction. Its supply was inconsistent, and its identity too often confused with spinel. Jewelers avoided it. Collectors coveted it precisely because it was rare and seldom appeared. Laboratories played the central role, confirming specimens and issuing reports that added each new piece to the record. By the 21st century, Taaffeite was firmly established as one of the ultra-rare gems, grouped with Musgravite, Serendibite, and Painite. Deposits in Myanmar, Tanzania, and China produced small numbers of crystals, but Sri Lanka remained the classic source. Even then, the total number of faceted stones remained limited to a few hundred at most weighing under 2 carats. Large gems were so rare that each was documented individually in trade journals. Taaffeite's significance lies not in myths, rituals, or commerce, but in its discovery story. A gem that should have passed unnoticed was pulled into history because one dealer questioned what he saw through a lens. Its fame comes from inversion. What seemed ordinary was not. What appeared known was unknown. For science, Taaffeite is a reminder that classification depends on scrutiny. For collectors, it represents the rare chance to own something that almost escaped recognition altogether. Historically, it is proof that even in the modern age, entirely new gemstones can enter the record. A stone labeled spinel showed double refraction. The test results overturned the assumption. Was it spinel or something else entirely? From Sphene, mistaken for common waste, to Taaffeite, uncovered by an error in classification, these 15 gems share one thread. Each was nearly lost, ignored, or mislabeled. Their stories reveal how thin the boundary can be between debris and discovery. Some vanished because they looked ordinary. Zektzerite blending into feldspar, Hiddenite thrown out as poor-quality quartz. Others were dismissed as flawed, like chiastolite with its black crosses, or Sinhalite circulating under the wrong name. A few, such as Poudretteite or Grandidierite, emerged briefly only to recede again, their presence confirmed more in laboratory records than in markets. Each case underscores how rarity is often less about brilliance and more about recognition, the willingness to look more closely, to test, and to record. None of these gems built empires, adorned crowns, or shaped rituals on a grand scale. Their survival rests on individual accidents, a miner's curiosity, a dealer's suspicion, a scientist's persistence. Without those moments, they would still be rubble, forgotten in quarries and gravel beds. The ranking closes here, not with a conclusion, but with the record itself. The stones exist. Their names are written. Beyond that, the rest remains unwritten.